Mr. Hugh Fraser.
It's a great delight to be here. I feel a little bit like the captain of the second team rugby giving a lecture to the Springboks. The battery on my remote is flat, so I have to sit here as opposed to back there. I can't see who's watching online, but I hope Patrick from Panama is here, and Brendan and Maya from Denmark. Australia is asleep, but we knew that already. Sorry for Australia. So Sarah Calvin said, don't make it too speedy, but it's 7:15 and this is a 1-hour talk. So it is fairly high speedy. And Lisa said, don't drink too much. So this is my second glass of wine. But this is a 1-hour talk. And actually it is a bit like the movie of the book, because I traveled with Bridget Hilton-Barber. She came to Joburg. She lives in Zanin. She's online as well, which is why she's not here. Don't touch anything. Don't touch anything. I don't know what it is. What is it from? Yeah, okay. So Bridget came to Joburg to buy a car, and she came for lunch, and we did what we always do, we get pissed. And I said that I was going, and she said, yes, she's available. So that's how we got together. I was going to go anyway. So we planned this thing, and eventually, and I made a budget, and then eventually the budget got so bad that the only way that I could deal with the budget is to not look at it anymore. So I'm making a movie with Ingrid, Linda, I'm not sure if she's online, and Christine Pater from Oka. And the first series came out today. I haven't seen it yet, but hopefully there will be a number. So even though I move very quickly through this thing, you can see Bridget's articles, which have been on for the last 13 weeks or so in Daily Maverick. So you can go online there and have a look. I've swiped the intro from the series which they made. So that's the intro to the series. It's been very nice. I did shoot everything on two cell phones, an i14 and an i12, and then I edited it, and then they did a grown-ups job. I'm wondering, Chris, if I should try and get rid of this. I'm worried I'm going to cock everything up. No, I think it's something with the mouse. Just talk a bit, and then it just turn up your hearing aid. Okay, there we go. Is that all right?
Can you see the little red stripe?
Yes, that's what we're trying to
try and erase it. It's probably on your left-hand side. You've got a little pencil, so I don't know if you drew something by accident.
And the zoom.
I don't know where you did. Not a train smash.
I'm getting older. I'm actually getting worse. Anyway, so Bridget wrote the 13 articles, and of course, like any famous person, I didn't necessarily agree with everything she wrote. As the Romans said, "Num quod veritas impediat viam bonum fabulum." Don't let truth get in the way of a good story. Or objects in the mirror maybe appear larger than they actually are. So this was our route, which was fairly defined on the way up. And then we ran out of money, so we hoofed it back as fast as we could. So that was we made it up as we went along. But it was through Botswana, into what Donald Trump calls Nambia, snuck into Zimbabwe, then up through Zambia, Tanzania, up Lake Tanganyika into Rwanda, into Burundi, Rwanda, and then out the side and then back down again. So these are the articles that Bridget wrote. They're all online and they're fabulous. Except for the one where she makes me sound like a squealing bitch, which I probably was on the inside, but on the outside, I was actually quite tranquil. So it was the day after Eusebius McKaiser died, which is quite upsetting. I worked with him quite a lot, so he was quite a controversial character, and that was quite upsetting. Anyway, and I'd never done this. As I say, this really is the second team talking to the Springbok team. I had never sort of done a trip as extensive as this, and I was on my own, and I didn't really know what to do. So I drove up the N1. I met Bridget at Graceland Eco Lodge. I've got 5 giraffes called Elvis, Priscilla, obvious names, as giraffes are. And you can see that this giraffe has had a bite taken out of the back. So giraffes are vegetarian, but they're not averse to taking a bite out of each other. So we met the next morning and we packed. As you can see, some of us worked a little harder than others. And we headed up to Groblersbrug and we crossed the bridge. And there were so many trucks that I left the car parked in the middle of nowhere and we were sorting out whatever was going on. And I said to Bridget, go and move the car because by then all the trucks had gone. And she's sitting like, what's his name? Jerry McQuay, who bought a Ferrari and he couldn't reach the pedals. So she had to ask Michael, who was driving to Congo, to move the car for her. She got a confectioner friend in Zanin who made biscuits. They were like giant family-sized zoo biscuits of the flags of each country. So we had to eat the country as we entered this. And then, of course, we were driving up through Nata towards the Magadichadi, and it was midday. So, of course, the Transbar was empty. We weren't there at night, so I don't know what the Transbar was like. I mean, seriously, do you guys know what a pothole is? Severe potholes, my ass. Anyway, we're into Botswana. We're skimming along. It's now the 1st of June. It's about close to 30 degrees. And we stay at Planet Baobab, which has got these quite charming little cottages. I'm not sure how accurate they are. A little bit Disney, perhaps, but they were great. And I'm such a sucker for baobabs. It's really, anybody who's been there would know, it's a great place to stay. And yeah, and the bar is great and the pool is great. And it was full moon as well that day, which was fantastic. And then the captain of the 3rd team and the scrum half from the 4th team set out and we got stuck in the sand. Hey Siri, remind me to take a compressor. Oh, I now have a compressor. Anyway, so no one's talking to you, Siri. Anyway, so we got stuck, I think, 5 times that day. And unfortunately, Bridget had to dig like a spaniel. But we got out eventually. And we got to Baines Baobab, which the collective noun for baobabs is a stillness, which is actually, if you've been here or into any sort of collection, it really is. It's a great name. One of our sponsors was Clement Gold. They gave us 2 big bottles and about 40 of the small ones. What's the difference between a big bottle and a small bottle? About 12 minutes. I don't think we were a quarter of the way through the trip when the gin ran out and we had to fill it with water. Mélange, s'il te plaît. What's the difference between a 5-year-old and a 65-year-old? Nothing. So now you can see why the flats are so popular with automakers. It really is great. And then we got stuck again and again, but now the engine was overheating as well. Something you just have to learn through experience. Then anyway, we finished up and we got back onto the road and you drive through, I can't remember if this was Nambia or Botswana, but there was traffic on the road which you have to slow down for. I mean, this is the main road, but it actually sits in the national park. And we got to the river lodge at Caprivi, which was fantastic for me because the Zambezi, I've been to Nambia, but not to Caprivi. And a local chief had died 2 weeks before, and they'd been drumming 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. And you know, when I mean, I'm working in tourism at the moment, so there's a bit of a bongo wongo stuff, but it was like this is like the real McCoy, and the river is already about 800 meters wide. So the map you can see it starts in Zambia. It looks as though it nips into DRC, comes down through Angola, back into Zambia, and it's another 2,000 Ks before it empties into the ocean. They were apparently beautiful, and this is not even doesn't even do it justice. This is actually even better than this, because apparently there were a lot of fires. It was June, July, so there were a lot of fires, which is good for sunrises and sunsets. And then there was this clown. I'd never seen this. Apparently it's called jet boarding, and there are crocodiles around. Anyway, Rian took us on it's beautiful, beautiful birding. I can tell the difference between an ostrich and a lilac-breasted roller, and that's about it. But then we were back onto the road again, through into Zimbabwe. And, you know, I mean, the one hilarious thing is leaving South Africa, everybody's like, be careful, be safe. God, the country that I felt least safe in was South Africa. There was a 20-minute blackout in Nambia because they're dependent on power. And then I think for the rest of the trip, we didn't have a blackout. So we got into Zimbabwe, and this is the opening of the tenders when the local ANC is in charge. I think probably everybody here has been to the Vic Falls. I've been 10 times, and it still amazes me. I've been once, I think in August, September of 2015, when there was probably literally 5% of the water going over, which would disappoint anybody from overseas. But for me, it was just absolutely spectacular because you could see the architectonic nature of the cannon. So I've done this before in a helicopter, and I've done it before in the microlights, but it's so magnificent that I did it again. Just by coincidence, we were camping right under where the helicopters were landing, so I got a $200 flight for $100. But what's nice about it is you get to see the Zambian side, the Zimbabwean side, and then you get to see the gorges, and there are 5 of them. And I would say, in my opinion, that if you had to choose between the Zambian side, even though they got less, is actually better. Plus, you can actually get down to the boiling cauldron at the bottom, and you get to do the nice bridge, which is over there. So it does make a huge difference at what time of the year you go. You don't really want to be there at this peak because there's genuinely so much water that you literally can't see anything. But it's still amazing. Finished in 1905, took 14 months. Cecil John Rhodes, who commissioned it, never saw it. Here's the Devil's Gorge, which you walk across. I've never done it myself, but when we came back, you can see there are people there. And then on the Zambian side offers you the opportunity to go down to the river, which you can't do on the Zimbabwean side as well. And in fact, there's a little streamlet that comes down that generates a little bit of power as well. There's a little hydroelectric station there, which I think generates more than Eskom. But anyway, you go over the bridge into Zambia, and we were camping, and I rediscovered the joy of jaffles. I've had a jaffle iron in my kitchen for about 10 years, which I hadn't used, which is actually a fantastic thing. And we discovered the joy of local whiskey, which went down faster than anything else that we drank. So Bridget managed to steal all the please do not disturb, please make up the room signs. And then some of our compatriots have got there as well. Geen laatslapers, soek avontuur, maak aand lekker groot. Actually, this was one of the nicest little camping setups that I've ever had. It's back to back, and this was the kitchen, and that's the bathroom, and it's just between one site. So it was actually really nice. That was the site, the beers, and then we headed off into Zambia through Livingstone. I had got a carnet. There was some debate as to what is the best way to do it. And I think in the long run, a carnet is the best. It costs 16,000 Rand, 16,500 Rand, but you get 10,000 Rand back. And basically you have a choice. You either pay TIPs, temporary import permits, or you use the carnet. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But I think in the long run, if you're doing the trip that we were doing, the carnet did make sense. And once you go into Zambia, you have to pay some things in dollars, some things in kwacha, and you have to have the toll form, which came back to haunt us later. But yeah, as soon as you got on the road to Lusaka, you go past the markets, which are quite charming. Although I think specialization would be a good idea here. Everybody seems to be selling the same product. This was, I have to see, hardworking pays, chicken and sausage. That's what he was selling along, and then we sat by the side of the road, had leftovers from the night before, and then Bridget's got a cousin in Lusaka, and we had been driving all day. It was about an 8 to 10 hour drive, and Bridget's cousin had arranged a dinner party for about 15 people that finished up at 4 o'clock the next morning. Except I wasn't part of it. But there was great fun had by all. They do have an elephant orphanage there, which is quite sweet. They had 5 elephants there of varying ages, and it's actually very charming. The oldest one is about 3 years old, and they were keeping the oldest one back to help the youngest one, who was only about 4 months old. And it's really, really lovely. And then they rewild them back into, I think it was into Kafui. There's the baby one. I think he was 3 or 4 months old. So then we got onto the road. There's a lot of believe in Allah, believe in God, believe in any God, and the roads just get worse. It's got a number of little monarchies. So the trucks, they're about between 800 and 1,200 petrol tankers a day, in spite of the fact that they've got a pipeline and a train, but somebody's got the road contract. So the roads are literally, the trucks are so heavy that they've made middle monarchies. They've made about 5 middle monarchies in the highway. And I think this was the first of a number of days where each day at the end of it, Bridget was saying, oh my God, this is the worst road we've ever driven on. Next day, it simply got worse. This was the Forest Inn Lodge that we overnighted in. Indian muscle at work. Troop carrier Yaenda. And then there was this whole system that probably some of you, when you're driving along, and it also depends somewhat on which country you are, the car in front of you indicates. If it indicates on the, I've probably got this wrong. If it indicates on the left, it means you can pass. If it indicates on the right, you can't pass, or you shouldn't pass. But it also varies from country to country. We got to the Kundalila Falls, which are lovely, really lovely. The school group was there, so we just did a little look. And this was by this time, Bridget and I had got our setup pretty down pat. Into less than 10 minutes, we got the tent up. The important thing was to eat before dinner, get shit-faced before sunset. And then I made the mistake of leaving the back door open for too long, and the battery went flat, so I started beeping, and Bridget said, no, it's just the insects. That was dinner. There was well received, as you can see. They really are. I don't know if anybody, we didn't know about the Kundalila Falls. They really are incredibly beautiful there. So they're about a day and a half northeast of Lusaka. So there were a lot of one-pot dishes. And there is an escarpment which is quite, you don't actually know it, but as you're driving through Zambia, suddenly this escarpment appears and the falls And they're really beautiful because the river sort of moves ahead and then suddenly falls to the side. Bitterly cold. This is me with my not so great drone skills. But they really are a lovely, lovely fall. Bitterly cold. And that's what it looks like. The escarpment. So actually really beautiful sort of sunset area along here. Of course, Bridget lost her glass. Anyway, so the battery's now flat and we're about 30 k's from the road, and a series of villagers tried to help us because they've all got amazing how much solar there was. But that wasn't working until eventually this car that looks like a disposable fold-up car came, and it shouldn't be rude because it did save our hut. They eventually jump-started us and we were on our way. So these are more of the lessons. So my friend Kay had given me one of these emergency starters. I've got a secret for you. Charge it. So, you know, when you photostat, the front page of the instructions are not the back. Anyway, this is the car, which looks like it crawled out of a warthog hole, but don't be rude, it saved us. And then the road just gets, so this is, Bridget and I thought the road was bad. It just got worser and worser. And what's quite interesting, it generates commercial activity because these people know that when the road gets bad, you've got to almost stop, which is a perfect opportunity to sell cassava or something like that. And then a couple of whoopsies along the way, which are quite common. And yeah, so eventually the highway just devolves into nothing.
Yeah.
Although I've been following a Dutch woman who rides a motorbike, and she was in West Africa, and that's just devolved into mud, and the trucks have been stuck there for 2 months. So anyway, he was our saver, Mark Harvey, who runs oh God, don't shout at me, Bridget. I know you can hear me, but don't say anything. It's the Shiwangandu and the whatever. Anyway, we've had a terrible day, a really terrible day. I think it literally took Bridget 3 weeks to get over the roads. The worst part of it is you have to line yourself up to overtake the truck, and then you have to sort of overtake, and then you have to scan the road that there's not one of these sneaky potholes that would even eat your car, Rick, because basically they're so big that if you fell into it, you would just flip. So it was absolutely exhausting. Anyway, he runs the Capicia natural hot water springs, which basically saved our asses. I mean, they're really beautiful. So I'm not sure if Mark is online, but hello, Mark. And nearby is Shiwangandu, which I think some of you may have been to. Was built in, I think, 1927, somewhere around there. Or when somebody said it was built 100 years ago, you think that was 100 years ago. But when they said it was built in 1927, that was like just before I was born. But it's a very beautiful house. It's a kind of a very stately house, literally in the middle of nowhere. And they're busy renovating it at the moment as well. So we went through, I don't know, 12, 15 roadblocks. And the scheme was always like, the bicycle's not fixed. That was when I still had a bicycle. Yes, it is. The boxes on the top are not fixed. Yes, they are. You can't drive with luggage on your back seat. Yes, we can. Show me your toll form. You're on the road to Numa and you're going to go out in Bala. You can't change your itinerary. Yes, we can. No, you can't. So I got a fine for a contravening road traffic regulations. But in actual fact, you can't see it from the image, but it's such a spectacular form that it was actually worth the 400 Rand bribe that I had to pay. Anyway, we went through the border, a very quiet border that we were the first people in 3 days. And we got through immigration and health control in about 90 seconds. And I think the immigration, her name was Happy. And the guy said, I love you, Happy. And she said, I love you too. And then about 20 minutes later, the man who was supposed to do all the car stuff came through about a half an hour later, doing up his fly. And then he couldn't switch on the computer, then he couldn't switch on the generator. So it took about 2 hours to get through. Welcome to Africa. And there was custard and a motorbike from Gauteng, which was doing what? I don't know. Anyway, what is charming about it is that pole is slowly. The road signs are all done by hand. And we landed up at the river, at lodge on Lake Tanganyika, which is possibly, look at it, I wasn't in a great condition, but possibly the best room that I've ever stayed in my life. I'm hoping that Chris Horsfall is listening as well. Oh no, Louise is listening. I hope that Louise is listening because Chris is out on the lake at the moment. It's absolutely spectacular. What I didn't know is that the lake is the highest that it's been in 86 years. So strictly speaking, these little lodges are about 70 meters from the lake and you look down onto a beach. But actually, when we were there, they were like little ships, which for me was great, actually. And yeah, the lodges and the room, I think I'm battling to think of a better room that I've ever stayed in my life. They've got a bar. These are the little lodges. So, I mean, obviously your impression of something is defined by the first view that you have of it. And strictly speaking, the lake edge would have been 70 meters away, but I like it where it is. Meals, the sort of the dining area is very low. And then because we didn't want to look like we were wusses, we did actually camp a couple of nights. Because I don't know what you're thinking that we had a nice time the whole time. And then, yeah, I particularly like the Joba, the injection room. Then here we're delivering a baby, obviously, and here you're doing teeth. So there's a little church and a little town nearby, which is worth visiting as well. And then it was back on the road again. We're heading up. We had to head inland and then up the road towards Kigoma. This was the Flotilla Pub, home of discipline in Kapili. And we were going to Kigoma. Part of the original, we were actually kind of going to go to Uganda, sort of, because it was cheaper to see the gorillas. In the end, we didn't get there. And we didn't see the gorillas either because it's now 25,000 Rand per person. But in Kigoma, which is the second biggest freshwater lake in the world, we had some roadside food, eggs and potatoes. And it's interesting. I mean, it is interesting the whole way how the rest of the world views Africa as homogeneous, how the subtle differences as you move from country to country in the transport, the food, the customs. I was amazed at how Muslim Tanzania was. Their president is a woman Muslim. And at times the roads are good. We overnighted. This was Bridget, I forgot his name. A charming man, runs a little sort of lodge. And we stayed in a room here. And there was some, I'm not sure, these were some kids that came to view us. Some teenagers. One. And there were hippos in the river that came to graze outside the room at night. So note to self, don't take a piss outside at night. And there was a mamba. We were driving they were building the road, and I'm very impressed with this. So I do a U-turn and I pull up and I'm photographing this. Bridget, remember, I can tell the difference between an ostrich and a starling. She's like, what the fuck are you doing? These things can get up on their hind feet and they'll attack us. She was the grown-up in the room. This was the other thing that struck me was the number of waterfalls that we came across the whole. This was the Nkondwe Falls, but they're also really beautiful. Also in the middle of nowhere. nobody there, no structure. So it was very much like this. I mean, I deliberately didn't trim this because that's what it was like. I mean, the roads at the time go from kind of good. I would put this like a Nambian road, which is like a good quality dirt road. The other thing is, of course, there was no footage of the terrible roads because I'm too busy squealing. That was when I still had a bike. And then we got into Kigoma. I mean, strictly speaking, it should be my T-shirt, but it's not. And we stayed at Jacobson's, and it's really beautiful. I mean, South Africa is quite a water poor country in terms of rivers and lakes, and one has no concept of how big Lake Tanganyika is. And this was the traffic jam in the afternoon as the fishing boats all head, in this case, to the north. So then we decided, we met a British couple who convinced us that it was worth the 10 or 11,000 rand to go and see the chimps at Jane Goodall's place at Gombe. So we took a boat up, going past these little villages. There are no roads at all. And in fact, to go to Gombe, there are no roads at all to get to Gombe. So there were these two sweet little birds that would like fly off, hitch a lift, fly off, come back and hitch a lift again. And they are birds in Rwanda. So as I said, this was 76,000 Tanzanians. So in all the trip cost about 10,000 rand, a combination of transport, park fees. It's expensive. I mean, we found Africa is expensive. Generally, it's $120 a day per person, park fees only. So then on top of that is accommodation and food and guide. It's expensive, So this was Jane Goodall. For the first 5 years, she's still alive. She camped, and then this was her first structure, another waterfall. This is Isaiah. I'm hoping that he's logged in as well. He's a sweetheart. He was our guide. I did tell him that we'd be online. But so you're only allowed to be there for 24 hours. So we got there at lunchtime, and you have to leave in 24 hours. So we walked all of the first afternoon and saw nothing. And Bridget said, this is just going to be a fucking expensive boat and walk trip. But the next morning, Isaiah and his cronies found Gremlin. She is, interestingly enough, I've seen this in the media, the anthropologists don't know how old. She was 51 when she had her younger child here, and slightly older. She's now 53. And they're using her as a test case to see how old chimpanzees can get, because there's no record of them. They are our closest relatives at 98%, and they have this lovely, cheap, charming demeanor about them. But what I didn't know is they're actually omnivores. So twice or thrice a week, they go and kill a baboon. And we're not talking carpaccio. It's usually like snatching a baby from its mother and then just, Nando chicken ripping its arm off. But that's exactly why, because they're our closest relatives. So this was, I think she had two babies. I think this was I can't remember if this was the older. I could have to see them together. I can't remember if this was the older or the younger one. Oh, that was the older one. This is the younger one. They do look very sweet and charming until the bonobos catch sight of them. And they are incredibly skittish. The other monkeys and baboons are very skittish in the area. because I subsequently found out that they are cunning hunters. Very human. We should phone Netanyahu. So when we first saw them, this was the younger one coming down the tree. And then on the way back, these were baboons that were just walking on the beach. It's incredibly beautiful. It's about 2-hour trip by boat from Kigoma up to Gombe, which is it's very, very lovely area. Yeah, I mean it would take from top to bottom, it would take seriously probably 5 days to drive. You can see the DRC on the other side, but Chris, who said he'd last been there maybe 8 years ago, he said it's a complete nightmare. It's like absolutely, you have warlords, and I mean, for somebody who's lived there for 30 years, he doesn't go to DRC. Yeah, so the idea of waterside living for us is something very different. Then we're back and we spend the night, and Bridget goes out and she hears these two people fighting, having a go at each other. And it turns out that they're Uruguayan and they're two brothers and they're not fighting. They're just chatting. So they're hilarious bunch. They live in Uruguay, and they've been traveling for 10 years on and off. And I think they're still in Tanzania somewhere. Hola, guapos. You sent us the video. He said, I sent you the video. No problem. Ciao, ciao. And then we left the next. I think it was the last tot of sunlight that really pushed me over the edge. Because the grandson, the Jamisons, was finished already. There was a solitary zebra called Sebastian, very lonely. Shame. So then Bridget didn't really want to go through Burundi because it is a bit hairy, but to drive around it was going to be a big schlep. So we decided that we would go through Burundi. And, it's kind of interesting. I've never heard of it. We were going to Burundi. People go to Burundi, of course, but I'd never known anybody. So you pay $40 for a visa, but there is no visa. They just stamp your passport. And they were actually quite charming. It is the poorest country in the world. But, when I was talking earlier to John what is poverty? I mean, there are parts of Joburg that are absolutely abject. This place looked, quite charming. We also decided that we weren't going to camp that day. We stayed in a lodge, Big Blue Bay, I think it was. Beautiful chicken, lovely chicken, beer, and then 71,000 Burundians, which is 450 Rand. Again, in many ways, Zambia, Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, Congo all look onto the lake, but there are slight differences in a couple of things. This, I think, is probably the biggest pothole that I've ever been. And you don't actually know how deep it is. I was going to ask him if he'd go stand in the middle, and if his head disappeared, I'd pay him. But so, I mean, it's but the graphics are really lovely. And also it becomes more Muslim, as you can see by the dress. But I absolutely loved the kind of artwork, which I guide to Soweto all the time. But it's done MTN, it's all very slick. It's got a sort of naive charm about it. Boulangerie. So they were when in the First World War, when Germany came second, the whole region was divided up. Tanganyika went to the British, so it was made up from Tanganyika and Zanzibar, which became Tanzania. And then Burundi and Rwanda were given to the Belgians. And I was in Belgium last week visiting my brother, and I went to the Museum of Africa. They still can't quite say sorry Very easy, 2 syllables, sorry. Anyway, so they cocked the DRC was not even it wasn't even a Belgian Congo. It was actually the personal estate of the king, who never went there. But the other thing is that we stayed in Bujumbura, and there was a Saturday afternoon, and there was a wedding, and of course people tarted up, and it's lovely. So it gives me hope about this country, even though we're going to shit. There'll still be nice parts. And the river, the waves were quite high, And then this is Bujumbura on a Sunday morning. We were driving around trying to draw money, but I can't remember if I put the picture in. Discovery owes me 2,800 rand because twice I tried to draw money out of an ATM, and you hear and the thing opens, like when it doesn't open, and your money's there, but it's not coming up aside. So that happened twice. Anyway, then we drove out. It's very mountainous. We drove through the other side, through the tea plantations, and because it's Belgian, the Belgians have more style than the Anglo-Saxons. I mean, if you were colonized by the Teutons, the English, the Dutch, the Germans, you got infrastructure and law and order, which is not the same as justice. If you were colonized by the southern, like the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Italians, you got good food and good architecture. So it was one or the other. We had the misfortune of being colonized by the English, and if it is humanly possible in the English, it's the Dutch. And we got a double whammy. At least Canada got the English, which you can Tipex out, and the French. We got 2 Teutons. This is Bridget adding mosquito net mystique. Oh yeah, this is the proof. So Discovery owes me 2,823 rand and some cents. Hello, Discovery. Already shown that one. So that it's very mountainous between Burundi and Rwanda, and there's this tradition of catching onto the buses and the trucks. And here you see this guy's caught on. I can't see if this guy's caught onto this guy, but this guy's caught onto this guy. So what they do is the trucks put thorns onto the back to try and stop them from jumping on. And then, of course, it's open season on how many people you can get onto a motorbike. Here you can see the riders and the free riders. And it was a Sunday, so everybody was coming out in their Sunday best, which was great. That's the tea. I've never really seen tea close up. Yeah, so the tea and the coffee throughout were, in fact, from Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, the tea and the coffee were great. Alimentation is food, boulangerie. Yeah, they do. They do speak French. Although there's a especially in Rwanda, a drive towards English. They specifically want to speak English. And when I went to Morocco last year, I stayed in a house. The teenagers didn't want to speak French at all. Because of colonialization. But also English is disregarded as the. So here we're crossing into Rwanda, and the first thing that they did was confiscate my drone. I had got slack because nobody had said anything, and crossing into Burundi, it had fallen out of the car, and so I thought nobody, but they confiscated it. But as my cousin says, they're fascists, but they're efficient fascists. So there was a long handwritten note with all the numbers and alles. And then when I moved out a few days later, 500 kilometers away, there was my drone. They sent it right across the country. They're efficient fascists. It is the cleanest country, so of course the best thing you can do is drink and drive. Bridget and I did make a policy decision: no daytime drinking, no day drinking. Occasionally. It is the cleanest country. I mean, I came back from Copenhagen, and it's cleaner even in Copenhagen. On the third Saturday of every month, you have to clean up with the president down. You clean up the country. I mean, what you clean up, I don't know, because there is no litter. So we got to, Bridget had arranged to stay at the Serena Hotel. We had a few days of quite tough driving. So she, as you can tell by her body language, was quite pleased. But then we stayed at the Serena, and it's a short walk to the restaurant, Heaven, obviously. But you are not allowed to walk at night because it's over the road from the president's place. So you can walk during the day, but you can't walk at night. So we took an Uber, and it came to 69,000 Rwandans, which is 1,000 rand. 1,000 rand. Yeah, but that seemed quite worth it. So we had some delicious food, actually. And again, they have these little sort of kapenta that are from Lake Kivu. And then we wanted to go to the Genocide Museum, and of course, Google was, and the government sent us in the wrong direction, and we landed up in the middle of Alex.
Well, that's
So we had to drive around, and eventually we landed up. And the people with the red hats are taxis. So the front person is the driver, the back passenger is the passenger. Sorry, the driver at the back, passenger at the back, and that you have to wear helmets. And because they're a fascist state, everybody does wear helmets. But so those are the taxis and the banana carriers. Actually it works really well. And you also buy airtime and you pay people, and it's a system that just works. So here's the Genocide Museum. You're not allowed to take any pictures, so I only took one. But yeah, it's pretty harrowing, as you can imagine. And they're not even a generation out of it, and it has an impact. It has to have an impact on the country. It's kind of scary. And this is a list of the names. And in fact, this is the Genocide Museum, but actually, I think there are 200 around the country, because the terrible thing about it is that the people were turning on families and neighbors. And who do we have to thank for this whole thing? The Belgians. They were the ones who started this Hutu-Tutsi separation. It didn't exist before. Then, in a rare moment of manliness, I discovered that my sidewall tire was rupturing. So we had to delay by a day. This was a delicious Indian food, cost 43,000 Rwandans. And of course, the only tire in town was a Michelin at 7,000 rand. So my brother, who lives in Brussels, very sweetly paid, and he sent me a note saying, "I've put 70,000 rand in your account." So I said, 70 or 7? He said, so it was only 7. I said, that's a pity, because if it had been 70, I would have turned around and carried on driving north. We were having a really good time. But basically, we were running out of cash, so we had now turned around and we were heading back south. This was very interesting for me, this architectural style, which we saw through Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. I mean, I'm an architect, and I couldn't understand why, because it's double the cost. And as I can understand, it's only for aesthetic reasons. It's not like they occupy it. And here, I think you can see, that's 3 up, but that's nothing. It's a half load. And then we were heading back through. So there you can go through the west, the east, or the middle. And the middle is the worst road. At times it wasn't bad. Here now I'm literally groaning because of the road. I think this was probably the worst road that we did. It was 500 kilometers of dirt, and we arrived in I can't even remember this godforsaken town. I think it's in Panda, and we went to 5 hotels, and they were all full. So there's part of me that can be incredibly sweet and naive. I thought, goodness, there must be a conference in town. It turns out that it's just drivers and prostitutes. So there was nowhere to stay. So it was the only night that Bridget and I had to share a bed. And by the morning, she had colonized the whole bed. I had nothing, and she had everything. But it is absolutely prohibited, not allowed for two people of the same sex to share a double bedroom. As far as we do not have a twin-bedded room in our hotel. Little did they know that she was trans. Anyway, so we headed off on this road that ate two more of the tires. I did post that somebody said, was your car having a pee on the side of the road? So at times the road was not bad. That's 3/4 load. And then luckily, by the time the tires were shredded, we had hit a dirt road. We'd hit a tar road. So I went to have the tires changed, and obviously you carry a map of Africa with you. So here's South Africa, there's Malawi, there's Rwanda or something. And this was Paul in Namibia. He was also one of our lifesavers. We spent, I think, 3 nights, I can't remember. And this is loading the vehicle again. It was our first opportunity to offload the entire vehicle to scratch and clean it completely. And obviously what's best is whiskey in wine glasses. That makes loading much better. Say again? I'll say Bridget, probably she is a good drinking partner. There's nothing girly about her, I can tell you. I still got the bicycle. Not that I'd used it. We had a chicken dinner that was great. And yeah, at times the roads did deteriorate down to nothing. Then I must say, one of the most unusual stretches was from Mbeya. You go up onto a plateau and they grow potatoes and bananas and coffee, which don't sound as though they go together that well, but actually, and it's incredibly beautiful. But you get up to, I think you're 2,800 meters in altitude with those beautiful kind of acacia trees. And then crossing the border into Malawi. And I now had finally lost my yellow fever certificate. So the woman says, it's fine. She just takes me through. She says, I drink Fanta. So then we were going to live in, this is the saddest part of the whole, we're going to live in Estonia. It took, I think, 2 hours to do about 12 Ks. And you can see by the road. And eventually the road got so bad that I took my bicycle off the back and I chained it to a tree. Bridget says, when we came back, the bicycle was gone, and so was the tree. That's not true. The tree was there. The bicycle was not there. It was another waterfall. And at times the road is not bad. But at times it was so bad that the bicycle was dragging on the road. Although there are 2 roads up to Livingstone, but no one told me, at least. Anyway, this is the view looking down over the lake. And this is probably the best loo with a view. This is the scene of the crime. Very sad. And then it was down onto Lake Malawi, which is, I'm sure most of you, or many of you have been. But it also, it has very different settings from the north, in the middle, to the south. I think this was in Qatar Bay. With traffic going backwards and forwards. They do. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. More camping and cooking. This is Bridget fell in love with the kettle because it's got a very sweet whistle, which I bought in Tokyo in 1996. And then it was back onto the road, and now we were back into the land of the baobab. I fell in love with it. I love baobabs. And then then there was debate as we should go into Mozambique. Obviously, we had to skip the north. Then we had to go down to Tofu and then come back up again. But that was going to add probably 18 hours to the trip. So we skipped through Tet, got bus doing 66 kilometers an hour in a 60 zone in the middle of nowhere. But I've done Mozambique, so I know the whole spiel. Anyway, and then there was this whole thing about paying the fine, and then the guy in the admiral's outfit did the fine, and the guy, Rick, I love you. And then the one traffic cop felt bad, so he said, "Have a nice day," and Bridget said, "Fuck off." So then we decided to go into Zim, and we drove a long distance on the road. We saw very few vehicles, and it's still mined. So if you want to pee, you stand in the car and pee from the car. Zimbabwe was going to always be interesting for me because you hear bad things about. We didn't go to Harare, but we went through Matari. You draw dollars from the ATM. It looked reasonable. I went into the spa. It was fully stocked, which is kind of interesting. This was one of the lunch stops. That's Tet and the Buchanov Bridge. And then back onto the roads in Zimbabwe. We camped here, which was very nice because we could get there as it opened at sunrise.
Does Zimbabwe work in the same atmosphere that we live in, is it like this?
You know, it's difficult to say. It's dollar-based, and certainly the towns that we went through Mutare and Nyanga, and they work and they clean. You can't pay with a credit card. You have to have cash, everything. So, you know, it's always difficult because there was this duality about the societies. The Burundi is just poor, but it works, whereas Zimbabwe is uber corrupt, ZANU-PF controls, but it works, you know, to some extent. Anyway, I think this picture is slightly out of time because this is me driving across the Limpopo River, which I had never done before, and I didn't know anybody had done it. And the water's about this deep, and you've got to drive about 700 meters. So I'm driving across in the car because there's no bridge. I'm going to get to the other side. And the only other border crossing is Bight Bridge, which is a living nightmare. So these are the people getting a lift. Yeah. And that's me back in South Africa. And I'm 3 minutes early. Boom. Right. Wow. So Bridget's articles are great, and the movie will be coming out. The first episode, Ingrid sent it to me today. I'll have a look. It'll be on the Times Live website. So I mean, Bridget, my friend Sarah says to me, "Don't rush," but the reality is, just see this as a trailer for the movie.
Right, guys, we do a couple of questions. I just remember.
Sorry, who's the hooded lady?
Sorry, it's Marion.
Oh, hi, Marion.
Please share your version of what Bridget wrote about on river crossing.
So that was this one. For the people online, could I hear my version of what Bridget said about? She made me sound like a squealing bitch, which I probably was on the inside. But look at me here. I look quite normal. She said I tried to. At one stage, I did want to get out of the car to see how deep it was. She made it sound like I was trying to abandon ship. You see the guy running down the side there. So luckily, she's on mute, and I am holding the orders. So, but never let truth get in the way. of a good story. Yes, I mean, I knew about it, and there is a fantastic app called iOverlander and Trucks for Africa, which were really good, really, really good. At one stage, we literally did come down the sides from Chikala Kuala, and we didn't know, what was going to happen. I mean, it's a bit nerve-wracking driving on your own, but then we saw some South Africans going up, and they said it was fine. But we landed up on the bank, and there was nowhere out. So we got onto Trucks for Africa, and it goes where goats go. It was really, so anybody's considering doing any of the ships, I have a lander and Trucks for Africa. But there's no bridge, and in the summer, there are 3 ferries, there's a ferry 3 times a week. And I'm sure people much more manly than me would handle it in a much better fashion. But it was the end of winter, so the river was about, you wouldn't be able to do it in summer. I have heard cars have been swept to it. The car was absolutely fine. You deflate the tires. Again, next time around, I'll be much more manly. Right. Yes, Johnny.
Given the fact that you had just a snapshot of all the countries you went to, was your overall feeling one of optimism?
Absolutely. The question was, you're getting more of a snapshot there. Our experience was more, it wasn't as snapshotty as I'm making it. What was my general feeling of optimism or pessimism? Without a doubt, optimistic on every level. We came back to South Africa, it snowed. There were blackouts, there were water outs. The weather was awful. And as I say, when you read in the media, so Burundi's the poorest country in the world, and Bridget didn't want to go. But depending on who's talking to you. So the people were incredibly friendly. The roads at times are terrible. There are always petrol stations. People are very friendly. I was absolutely optimistic. But to be honest, I think that Central East Africa is nicer than Central West Africa, because we are talking about driving to Gabon. Good luck with that. Through both of the Congos. And as I said, Chris Horsfall, who lives on Lake Tanganyika, I think DRC is a bit hysterical. So it depends very much where you are. But by and large, we had nothing but friendliness and helpfulness. Yeah. We did see a couple of cyclists and walkers. We actually came, somebody was walking. What the hell do you want to walk? As I say, I think Sudan is closed. So there was a lot of traffic between Cape Town and Kilimanjaro and Nairobi. We did see a few cyclists, and we did see the one walker. Not a lot. And they would probably take a slightly different route to what we took. But we did see them. And it would be feasible. And yeah. And again, iOverlander is very good because it's very geo-specific where you can camp. Yeah, and we felt safe. Burundi, which had a bad rap, Bridget writes exquisitely about the little miniature dictator as we went, and he was literally about this, and he picked his teeth the whole time that we were checking in. But actually, Burundi was quite relaxed, and Bujumbura was quite, it's a poor, abject city, but like that wedding photograph that you saw was, So there isn't, these countries are not homogenic, they're layers and sectors. Very much the same as South Africa,
The question for me is, you talked about the warlords. Do they come into
No, the warlords on DRC. No, they stick to their side. They stick very much to their side. The Tanzanian side is completely tranquil.
What would be the reason for that? When you were thinking,
well, it's just
pickings.
It's just that DRC doesn't exist as a state. It's made up of Kinshasa, Lubumbashi, and any number of, and I don't know. It shouldn't be a country, but I don't know. It's never gonna. It's gonna take ages. And the trouble is, they're very minerally rich as well. But they stay on their side, and Chris stays on his side.
Guys, anybody else?
Let's Andrew. No. Lewis, any questions on your side?
There were a couple of questions, but Bridget answered them. She was online, so she answered the things like driving on the left.
Oh, God. Yeah. So all the countries, yeah, so the driving, wherever you were colonized by the British, drive right-hand vehicles on the left-hand side. Belgium, Rwanda and Burundi drive on the other side. It was a little weird driving a right-hand vehicle on the right-hand side. So Bridget and I had to have this setup where I would pull over to the right and I would look down the side of the road. Then I would pull to the middle of the road and she would look down the left-hand side. And then she would say, go for it. And you'd put foot and you know, so when you cross the border from Tanzania into Burundi and also back, they do both countries make a big thing about doing this crossover. But it's fine when you're in traffic. You just stick to your side. But Bridget and I traveled in Portugal in 1997 or something like that. The biggest mistake you need to remember is the traffic circles do the opposite to us. We go clockwise, they go anti-clockwise. But yeah, otherwise, it was fine.
Lewis, anything else on your side?
No, as I said, it was just about cash and credit card and US dollars. But Bridget answered those. So
it's a big thing, the carnet, and I have tabulated everything in terms of bribes, traffic cops, passports, money, ATMs. So if anybody is particularly interested in that, it's available. That information is available.